9:13 this morning here on OTB AM. Delighted to say Alan Quinlan is with us. Alan, good morning to you. How are you?
Morning, lads. How are you?
How important was it for Munster just to get a win, no matter what they needed to do to get the win against Ulster?
Yeah, I said it during the week, Ger. It was probably they probably needed a performance. I think the win was the obvious thing they needed. They needed to see an improvement in the performance, and it wasn't perfect at times. There was issues and mistakes, but the urgency and the intensity of the players and the reaction was so much better. Everybody was kind of hoping for a reaction the week before against Connacht after the Cass game, even though they won that game. But I think it's really, really important that they got a result on Saturday night, and against all the odds, really, when Simon Zebo got sent off early and Ulster started really strongly. So I think the reaction is really good, and it'll do them the world of good going forward.
You must have been concerned 15 minutes in when Ulster kicked to the corner and were able to push over and already had a good strong maul up to that point, where you're thinking this looks fairly similar to what we saw last week.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised though. I think I was watching Ulster warm up and just their body language coming into the stadium. I think they sensed a bit of vulnerability, which is not rocket science. I think they certainly sensed an opportunity. They had two good, really brilliant away wins this season against Ulster and against Claremont in the Champions Cup. So I think they sensed an opportunity here and a bit of fragility, if you like. And they started very well. Their maul is strong, and their forward pack was pretty strong starting that game. Both sides are missing a few players, there's no doubt about that. But the way they started, it was very aggressive. They were direct, a lot of one-out runners, and it was very attritional. And to be fair to both sides, at the end of it, there was big effort from both teams, and they put a lot of pressure on each other. But that start certainly, quietened the crowd a little bit, and you just had the sense that this could be tricky and a few things are going wrong for Munster here. And but the reaction was really good, I think.
The Munster game plan has obviously come in for criticism at various times, and it wasn't a night that was conducive to great expansive play, but it was interesting that Mike Haley does eventually get his try, because the ball does eventually get passed out wide to him, and the mirror image of that in the first half was Mike Haley screaming for the ball out wide and not getting the ball in his hands. So do the players have to take some blame at times when it comes to the style of play, not making the decisions to go wide when they're bearing down on the Ulster goal, or do you think that's more of a directive from the coaching box?
I think the players, of course, have to take responsibility and have to take some of the flack. And I suppose from the previous week, Johann van Gran and his coaching staff, Stephen Larkham, got a lot of flack based on what we'd seen, particularly in the Connacht game. But maybe the performance against Cass was a bit flat as well. There's a bit of mitigation there. They haven't played in a long time, and that mitigation is still probably there. And it's the same for a lot of teams now, having played for a while, but particularly with Munster, with what happened in South Africa and a long layoff. Some players hadn't played in a long time. So you talk about leadership and decision making out in the field. You get a plan off your coaching team, and you practice it and you work on it. And there's times where there's 2-on-1s where you should give the pass, or you should keep the ball alive. And those moments, yes, players have to take responsibility for that. And there is a game plan, and the game plan probably didn't enable the players and allow them to attack more. I think the mistake that was made going to Galway was to try and play in the opposition half at all costs, not take risks and try and grind out a result, which backfired, and it frustrated people. And Johann hasn't got a lot of criticism since he's come here, and I think this is last week was probably the worst week, and he was speaking about outside noise. You got to block it off. That's fine. Block out the outside noise from me, from Donald Lennon, from Keith Wood, from other people, ex-internationals or people who played with Munster, but it's impossible to block out all the noise from the fans. They're saying the same thing, and it's very easy to track that now on social media and the reaction. And I think that game frustrated a lot of people last week. Not losing to Connacht. Connacht are a side now that they kind of expect to win at home. They're very capable of beating anyone, even on the road. And Andy Friend has done a really good job there. But the noise that Johann is talking about is just, he hasn't had a lot of that, and it's based on what we saw against Connacht. And I was a little bit disappointed that he didn't address that more. None of us want to criticise Munster or want to be in that position, but there was a bit of a trend starting in this period that was a negative one, and we all believe that the players are much better, and maybe the coaches are much better than that. And I think we saw a little bit of evidence on Saturday night, particularly if you look at the last try that Alex Candelan scores. Gavin Coombs goes up the middle of the field, and an incredible offload with the right hand out to Josh Wycherley, keeps the ball alive. Jack O'Donoghue makes a brilliant break, and they execute and they score the try. The pick and goes before half time, similar stuff to maybe Connacht, but this time they looked like they could possibly score. They just looked very lethargic and lacking energy in Galway. But when Mike Haley scores the try, they kick into the corner. Treadwell got sin-binned, and they showed a little bit of a ruthless edge with more clarity in the attack. And when Craig Casey gets the ball, he's bossing fellas out of the way. And there's one thing in his mind this time is, I'm going to look for the pass. We're going to move this. And, credit to them, because they've learned from their mistakes. And, if you're picking and going close to the line now, with the new law, if you get held up over the line, it's a dropout. You lose the ball. So I think that was, there was things in the game that we saw that were better. And going back to your question on, of course, players have to take responsibility because they can make decisions on the run out in the field, but the plan and the structure has to be encouraged more. There's no problem being direct and tight and playing to Munster strengths, but when there's space to exploit, they have to do that.
It feels to me like every single game over the next couple of weeks, until they find some rhythm and until they book a place in the knockout stages, is actually a referendum, and it is kind of the season on the line, because it could be a lost season. We could have a lame duck coaching ticket. Now, the fact that Roundtree's staying, I think, is actually really important, because it means that there's a voice there that's going to be there next year that everybody knows, particularly the forwards have to impress him, and there's a possibility he might get the main gig, so that keeps everybody at least on their toes until an announcement is made about who is getting the main gig. But very difficult for him just to be the one voice there that everybody knows. I need to prove to you next season. And I know professionalism kicks in, and I know that they have a contract and they have a job to do and all that kind of stuff, but human beings are human beings, and they're looking at Van Graan and go, well, you're out the door. You're like, you don't have that loyalty to us that you're asking for us to put our bodies on the line to implement your game plan. So it's a really weird situation. But there is also a scenario in which they can join together, build on that identity that you're talking about in the second half, and kick on from here.
Yeah, Ger, I don't buy into this. Of course it can happen when a coach announces they're leaving, of course, and we debated this over Joe Schmidt when he announced he was leaving. Did it affect the World Cup with Ireland? Can it affect, we've seen it in Premiership soccer. Of course it can happen, but it shouldn't happen. If you have enough leadership in the group, it can happen with some individuals if they feel that they weren't getting a chance. Of course, they can have been a negative kind of presence can become positive. It can work both ways. Guys who, were frustrated with coaches, and not every player will love a coach every time in any sport. That's just the reality. It should be player driven, and I don't buy into the scenario that it should be allowed to happen, that players drop their standards a little bit and the coaches are going. I think, in fact, with this group, it should enhance them more to maybe be a little bit freer in what they're trying to do and express themselves more and show their quality. They're getting well paid. They're well paid professionals. That that danger is there. I think Roundtree being involved, you make a very valid point. And I think that little bit of continuity there. And it's more so knowing the players, you know, when you have new coaches, whoever comes in, whether Graham Roundtree could take over and they could fill with some assistant coaches, which is a real possibility. And I don't think it'd be the worst thing in the world. I think Graham Roundtree is well capable of being the head coach. You know your players, you know their capabilities, you know their characters, you know their faults, their weaknesses, and their strengths, of course. So, look, it is what it is. And professional sport, with Johann leaving and Stephen Larkin leaving, that's just reality. It's not ideal, but they've got a fair bit of backing. But they have to listen. Forget about listening to us if they don't want, like I said. But, you know, the fans go support the team and they just want the players to... There's not an expectation that Munster win the URC or the Champions Cup, but people hope they're in the fight and at least, you know, they're expressing themselves a little bit better and attacking a little bit more. And that attack, and I'll say it again, I've said it a few times, is not about going from winger to winger to winger. It's about just tempo, better shape when you get into multi-phase and actually holding on to the ball for a period of time. You've got to, you know, react to the personnel you have on the field and try and play to their strengths. So was it as bad as maybe the perception out there was last week? Probably not. They haven't fixed everything, but no. I think it was better. I think the reaction was just much better. And even if Munster lost the game on Saturday night, of course there'd have been frustration.
Can I bring up one last thing?
Possibly should have won it.
Yeah. Can I bring up one last thing? Victor Matfield was speaking on South African TV, South African Super Sport television. He said, I spoke to Johann van Graan and he said it was so frustrating at Munster as all the good players go to Leinster. With friends like that, who needs enemies? I think that was misconstrued, definitely, because I couldn't believe Johann would say something like that, because it makes no sense, does it? The good players go to Leinster. Where has that happened? I think it's the other way around, that players have come down from Munster and from Leinster to all of the other provinces. So however Matfield mangled it, whatever Van Graan is saying to him doesn't sound great either way. Whatever, you know, because everybody's got to fill in the blanks, right? Matfield definitely had a conversation with Van Graan. I think we all accept that. Matfield then feels confident enough to go on telly saying he's frustrated because, and I don't know what he could have been talking about, but I don't know what Van Graan said to give Matfield an impression that whatever's happening here, Van Graan's the wrong man at the wrong time for this gig now. Like, we can see that, I think.
Well, look, nothing's going to happen. I think he's got to try and finish out the season. I don't think you'll have a situation where Johann van Graan goes or is asked to go earlier than he should, and then the contract expires. I think it's unfair on Johann to kind of start saying, well, he's saying something to Victor Matfield. That's completely skewed what he said. I'm sure he has frustrations with certain things in the organisation. And is
he
everything
should just say
perfect
it though, shouldn't
there?
he?
No.
Shouldn't he say it?
Yeah,
shouldn't he instead of like fighting with Murray Kinsella, just tell everybody what you actually think? Because he's never really told everybody what he thinks about the job. It's always been like very guarded, and maybe that's the right way to do things. I don't know. Maybe
no, it's not. And you know, you're referring to the interview with Murray Kinsella where he was quite spiky, and we would all love to see Johann just say in a way that it wasn't good enough and that we need to be better.
Yeah,
I think that's what he just needs to say. And what can you say with a microphone back to a guy then? Just open a little bit. It's not about like having a closed shop all week and a normal training week. How could it be a normal training week? There has to be some sort of edge and spark there, and I'm sure there was. And they're trying to do their best. Like, that's the reality. But there's a frustration that the best is not being got out of these people. And maybe the coaches did look at themselves during the week and look at the structure and it's not a complete disaster because they've only lost 2 games.
No, it's not a disaster.
You know
that's
what I
the
mean?
thing. The standards are high.
But I think
expectations are high, and it's not a disaster. It's a great team. Like that's
and they've been unlucky with some of the injuries. You know, Carberry's out, Snyman.
Yeah,
it's a really good job. And that's going to be a factor going forward. But just the reality, in simple terms, just to finish on it, we want to see these guys express themselves a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I think I saw a glimpse of that Saturday night. So well done. You know what I mean? It's
build on it now.
It's a busy couple of weeks. Move on and
Okay.
Johann, just come out and say we're not happy with the performance. That's all people want,
Exactly.
and we're going to do everything in our power to fix it.
Alan, good stuff.
I think the fans deserve that. I don't deserve that. Keith Wood, maybe Donald Lenihan, but just tell the fans that.
I think that's a fair point. Good one for us to finish on. Alan, good stuff. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers, lads. Thanks.
Alan Quinlan there. Calling on Johann van Graan just to be a bit more forthcoming with how they actually feel. Like, there's definitely whatever you say nothing attitude in a lot of sports. We know that, like, but it hasn't worked. It hasn't helped them to win games, has it?
It hasn't helped him to win trophies anyway. Like, I mean, it was interesting before the Bath thing was confirmed and it was just speculation. He did get asked about it in a press conference and he was like, I'll never allow these things to be played out through the media. I won't be responding to speculation. And despite the fact that it's now been confirmed and it's no longer speculation, he has still refused to actually go on the record properly about this and actually be a little bit transparent about it. And maybe when he does these interviews, he feels that he's talking to the reporter and the reporter alone. But actually, he's talking to a pretty sizable audience out there. It's a huge amount of people who couldn't go to Thomond Park because of crowd restrictions on Saturday who are watching that and who are also getting that curt response from Van Graan.